My parents wanted to give my share of inheritance to their favorite daughter. But little did they know that my grandparents had other plans. Hey everyone, we put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what we do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hey guys, I don't really like posting personal stuff here, especially things related to family issues, but I need to get this off my chest and hear what you guys think. Since I was young, I always felt like I was living in my stepsister, Chloe's 25 female shadow. She's younger than me by 3 years, and from the moment she was born, it was clear she was the star of the show. I, Ethan, 28 male, was the quiet, dependable older sibling who never rocked the boat, while Chloe was the golden child who could do no wrong. It wasn't just my imagination. My dad and stepmother made it painfully obvious. My stepmother, Melissa, entered our lives when I was 12, after my mom passed away. At first, I hoped she'd be someone who could bring our family together, but it quickly became clear she had a favorite, and it wasn't me. Melissa had always been more invested in Chloe's life, seeing her as the perfect daughter she ever had. I, on the other hand, was treated like a strange in my own home. While Chloe got lavish birthday parties and expensive gifts, I was lucky to get a pat on the back. When I graduated high school with honors, it was a proud moment for me. My parents, though, barely acknowledged it before launching into plans for Chloe's upcoming dance recital. Every achievement of mine felt like it was eclipsed by her existence. Still, I didn't let the imbalance define me. I threw myself into my studies, determined to carve out a future for myself. I graduated from college with honors, landed a solid job in finance, and even bought my first home at 27. Chloe, on the other hand, took a more leisurely approach to life. She dropped out of college after 2 semesters, claiming it wasn't for her, and took a part-time job at a coffee shop. She still lived at home, rent-free, while I was out navigating adulthood on my own. It wasn't jealousy, not entirely anyway. I had worked hard to be independent and was proud of what I'd accomplished. But the disparity in how we were treated stung. Our parents never expected Chloe to grow up, to take responsibility for herself, or to contribute to the household. And even though I'd built a life far away from their bubble, that favoritism lingered in the back of my mind, like an old wound that never quite healed. Then Grandpa Robert passed away. He was the one person in the family who treated me and Chloe equally. His death was painful for me, but I didn't expect that it would change everything. Upon my grandpa's death, the family gathered for the reading of his will. It was a bittersweet occasion. He had been a self-made man, someone I deeply respected. I thought this would be a straightforward division of his estate among his kids. Grandpa wasn't one for games or drama, but what unfolded at that lawyer's office shocked us all. Grandpa had amassed a fortune of $4 million. Yes, you read it right. He had left it equally divided among his 3 children and his 5 grandchildren, approximately $700,000 each, for me, Chloe, and our cousins. As I sat there hearing the lawyer read it aloud, I felt overwhelmed. I had never even dared to dream about having that kind of money. This money could change my life in so many ways. Paying off student loans, starting my dream business, maybe even putting something aside for my future family. For a brief moment, it felt like a vindication. Grandpa had always seen my efforts and my value, even if my parents never did. It was like he had left a final message to remind me that I was just as deserving as anyone else in this family. But of course, my parents couldn't let me have that moment. Melissa's jaw dropped as the lawyer finished reading the terms of the will. That can't be right, she said, cutting him off. The lawyer calmly repeated the terms, but Melissa's frustration was evident. This doesn't make sense, she said, shaking her head. Chloe's still trying to find her footing, and this could really help her. Meanwhile, some people already have stability. Shouldn't the money go where it's needed most? Her voice rose with every word, as if she expected the lawyer to change the will just to appease her. After the reading, Melissa and Dad cornered me in the hallway. Their expressions weren't ones of grief. They looked like they were about to launch a sales pitch. Dad cleared his throat, the way he always did before starting a serious conversation. Ethan, he began, his tone dripping with feigned concern, Chloe needs this money more than you. I blinked, caught off guard. What? Melissa stepped in, her voice taking on that manipulative edge she'd mastered over the years. I knew it too well. You're already successful, sweetheart. You have a good job, a house, you're doing fine. But Chloe, she's still figuring things out. She's struggling. Melissa's desperation wasn't just about money. She'd built her identity around being the matriarch who held everything together, even if it was at my expense. To her, This inheritance was just another way to enforce that control. I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. So, you're saying I should just give her my inheritance? How could they expect me to give up my future for someone who refused to take charge of her own? Wasn't it time Chloe learned to stand on her own 2 feet? This wasn't about fairness. It was about enabling her to stay exactly where she was. Well, Dad said, smiling like he thought this was perfectly reasonable. Not all of it, of course. Maybe half, or even just enough to get her on her feet. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand wrapped in sugar-coated guilt. I'm sorry, I said, crossing my arms. But no, this is my money. Grandpa left it to me for a reason. Melissa's expression hardened instantly. She'd always had a way of turning a conversation into a guilt trip. So you're just going to let your sister struggle while you hoard all that money? What do you mean, struggle? I shot back. She lives in your basement rent-free and works part-time by choice. If she's struggling, it's because you've enabled her to avoid taking responsibility for her own life. That hit a nerve. Mom's face flushed red, and Dad stepped forward as if he were about to say something. But before he could, I turned and walked away. I wasn't going to let them guilt trip me into giving away what was rightfully mine. Back at home, I started to strategize. The inheritance was a gift, but it also came with the potential for drama. My parents' behavior at the reading confirmed what I'd always suspected. They saw me as a resource to support Chloe. I wasn't about to let them manipulate me into sacrificing my future. But they didn't let me alone. The next day, I called Aunt Julia, my dad's sister. She'd always been the black sheep of the family, outspoken, independent, and not afraid to call people out on their nonsense. If anyone could give me honest advice, it was her. When I explained what had happened, Julia let out a bitter laugh. I'm not surprised, she said. Your parents have always coddled Chloe, and they probably see this as just another way to protect her from reality. She then told me something that made my blood run cold. Grandpa knew this would happen. That's why he added a clause to his will. If anyone contests the distribution, they forfeit their share. He didn't want his money to tear the family apart. I felt some relief. Grandpa had seen the storm coming and put measures in place to stop it. But even with that clause, I knew my parents wouldn't back down easily. They weren't the type to accept a loss without a fight. A few days later, the inevitable happened. Melissa and Dad called, inviting me over for dinner. I knew it wasn't going to be a casual meal. As I sat at their kitchen table, Melissa launched into another plea, this time peppered with emotional blackmail. We've always done so much for you, she said, her voice trembling. We sacrificed to give you a good life. Now we're just asking you to help your sister. Is that so much to ask? Melissa, I said, keeping my voice steady. I've worked hard for everything I have. This inheritance isn't about you or Chloe. It's about Grandpa's wishes, and I'm not going to dishonor those. That's when Dad lost it. He slammed his hand on the table, shouting, You're being selfish, Ethan. Family comes first. Grandpa would be ashamed of you for putting money above your sister. I stood up, ready to walk out. Grandpa wanted this money to be split equally. If you can't accept that, maybe you're the ones dishonoring him. Their guilt trips and shouting matches didn't work on me. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I wasn't going to let them bully me into giving up my future. But as I left their house that night, I realized this was only the beginning. After the blow-up at dinner, I thought my parents might back off for a while, but I should have known better. They didn't stop, they doubled down. The guilt trips turned into full-on campaigns. Every phone call was another lecture, and they even roped in extended family members to try to shame me into giving up my share. The worst was my Uncle Peter. He and Dad had always been close, and Peter was a master at turning everything into a morality lesson. Ethan, he began during one particularly tense phone call, you're putting money above family. You're better than this. Chloe is your sister. She's blood. She needs your help. I'd heard it all before. Uncle Peter, I replied, trying to keep my frustration in check. Grandpa didn't leave this money for me to hand it over to someone else. He wanted it to be split equally, and that's what's happening. It's not my responsibility to fix Chloe's problems. Well, someone has to. He was tense. If you don't step up, you'll regret it when the family falls apart. The irony wasn't lost on me. Somehow I was being blamed for tearing the family apart, even though I was the only one respecting Grandpa's wishes. Feeling cornered, I turned to Aunt Julia again. She'd been my lifeline in this mess, and as usual, she didn't disappoint. Don't let them bully you, she said firmly. Your parents have always put Chloe first, and now they're panicking because they can't control this situation. They're used to manipulating her, and they think they can do the same to you. I've been looking into some things, Ethan, and I think you should know, your parents are in serious financial trouble, she added. That stopped me in my tracks. What kind of trouble? Massive debt, she said, her voice heavy with concern. Credit cards, loans, even their mortgage. I think that's why they're so desperate to get their hands on your money. And Chloe's too. I was shocked. If what Julia was saying was true, this wasn't just about favoritism or guilt tripping. My parents were trying to use my inheritance to bail themselves out of the mess they'd created. I decided to dig deeper. It didn't take long to confirm Julia's suspicions. A few discreet conversations with extended family members revealed that my parents had been living way beyond their means for years. They'd refinanced the house multiple times, maxed out credit cards, and even taken out personal loans. Their lavish lifestyle, the new car, the vacations, the constant help they gave Chloe, was all built on borrowed money. The worst part? They weren't just eyeing my inheritance, they were already dipping into Chloe's. Julia uncovered financial records showing that Melissa had convinced Chloe to let her manage a large portion of her inheritance. It was gone. My parents had convinced her to let them manage her share, promising it was for her benefit. But instead of investing it or saving it for her future, they'd used it to pay off their debts and fund their lifestyle. I was furious, but I knew confronting Chloe directly wouldn't be easy. She'd been under their thumb her whole life, and she'd always believed their excuses. Still, I couldn't let this slide. I invited Chloe out for coffee. She showed up with her usual carefree attitude, but I could tell she was suspicious. She'd heard about the fight with our parents, and had probably already been fed their version of events. "So," she said, stirring her latte, "what's this about?" I took a deep breath. "Chloe, I need to talk to you about your inheritance." Her eyes narrowed. "What about it?" "I know Mom and Dad have been managing it for you," I said carefully. "But I've seen the records, and a lot of that money is already gone." She frowned, clearly confused. "Gone? What are you talking about?" "They've been using your inheritance to pay off their debts," I explained. "Credit cards, loans, the mortgage. They're in over their heads financially, and they're using your money to bail themselves out." Chloe laughed, but it was a nervous, disbelieving sound. "That's ridiculous. They wouldn't do that." "Chloe," I said gently, "they're not being honest with you. I can show you the records if you want." She stared at me, her expression shifting from doubt to anger. "This is just another way for you to make them look bad, isn't it? You've always been jealous of me." Her words stung, but I stayed calm. "I'm not trying to make them look bad. I'm trying to protect you. They're taking advantage of you, Chloe. You don't have to believe me, but at least look into it." She didn't say anything as she got up and left. I watched her walk away, feeling like I'd failed. But then, a few days later, Chloe called me. I thought she changed her mind after our last talk. However, her tone was sharp, and I could feel the accusation hanging in the air before she even spoke. "How dare you?" she hissed. I blinked. Hello to you too?" "Don't play dumb. Mom told me everything." Chloe had always looked up to Melissa, who used that influence to keep her under control. "You've always been so bitter about how they treat me. But this is low, even for you." I held the phone tighter. "What are you talking about, Chloe?" "Oh, don't act clueless. You tried to make them look like thieves. Do you realize how insane that sounds? My inheritance? Gone? You think I'm stupid enough to believe that?" I sighed, already exhausted. "Chloe, I'm not trying to start drama. I'm just telling you the truth. You can even check the bank statements yourself, if you can get them, that is." She snorted, a cruel edge to her laugh. "Bank statements? Oh, please. You've always been obsessed with this idea that they favor me and hate you. Newsflash, they love me because I'm not a complete pain in the ass like you are." There it was. Classic Chloe. The golden pedestal she lived on wasn't just built by our parents. She'd added a few bricks herself. "I'm not doing this to compete with you, Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This isn't about me. It's about you not getting blindsided when all your money is gone." She started shouting, "If it's gone, and even if it was, maybe they had a good reason. I mean, you don't get how hard they've worked for us because you're always too busy feeling sorry for yourself. Not everything's about you." I clenched my jaw. "You know what? Fine. Keep living in your fantasy world. But don't come crying to me when reality smacks you in the face. Because it will, Chloe. It always does." Her laugh this time was pure mockery. "Yeah, right. You've been wrong about everything else. Why would this be different?" She hung up before I could say another word. For a second, I just stared at my phone, wondering if I should have handled it differently. But no matter what I said, Chloe would always default to the same entitled denial. I'd handed her the truth on a silver platter, and she'd thrown it back in my face. Let her keep believing their lies. It was only a matter of time before the house of cards came crashing down. My parents weren't the kind of people to admit defeat, even if caught red-handed. Instead, they shifted their tactics, going from guilt-tripping me to full-on vilifying me within the family. They doubled down on their narrative that I was greedy and selfish. Dad called every extended family member he could think of, spinning a sob story about how I was tearing the family apart over money. Uncle Peter, predictably, ate it up and became their loudest supporter. Every family group chat was suddenly full of passive-aggressive messages about the importance of family and selfishness ruining relationships. I stayed quiet, refusing to engage in their theatrics. It wasn't worth it. But while I was focused on ignoring the noise, my parents were working behind the scenes on something much more underhanded. It started with a letter from a lawyer. I opened it to find a formal notice that my parents were contesting Grandpa's will, despite the forfeiture clause explicitly barring anyone from challenging the distribution. They were claiming that Grandpa hadn't been of sound mind when he wrote it. The implication was clear. They wanted the entire estate to be redistributed, likely in a way that would favor Chloe and themselves. As the days passed and the court proceedings began, the sheer entitlement of Melissa and my father became impossible to ignore. Every court appearance was like a theater production starring Melissa as the wronged matriarch, eager to twist Grandpa's clear intentions into something that suited her vision of fairness. Melissa's entitlement was on full display as she stood outside the courtroom, ranting loudly to anyone who would listen. "This isn't just about money," she fumed. "It's about what's right for our family. Ethan has no idea how much we've done for him, and now he's trying to steal what should have gone to Chloe." She spoke as though the inheritance had been hers to decide, as if Grandpa's wishes didn't matter as much as her own vision of fairness. I couldn't believe it. Contesting the will meant they were risking their own share of the inheritance, not just mine or Chloe's. It was a desperate, reckless move that reeked of their financial struggles. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. Melissa had always positioned herself as the one holding the family together, even when it came at a cost to others. She'd built her identity around being the matriarch who kept Chloe on a pedestal and everyone else in line. I called Aunt Julia immediately. "They're contesting the will," I told her, barely able to keep the anger out of my voice. Julia sighed heavily. "Of course they are. They think they can scare you into backing down. Do you think they'll win?" I asked. "Not a chance," she said firmly. "Grandpa was as sharp as ever when he wrote that will, and I'll testify to that if it comes to it." Still, the thought of a drawn-out legal battle was exhausting. I didn't want to spend months, maybe years, tied up in court because my parents couldn't accept reality. As I was preparing to respond to the legal notice, Chloe called me, her tone smug and laced with mockery. I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation the moment I heard her voice. "Well, well," she said with a sarcastic laugh. "Looks like you're not the only one who gets to have opinions about my inheritance." I frowned. "What are you talking about, Chloe?" "Oh, just that Mom and Dad came over with some papers for me to sign. They said it's all about finalizing the will stuff. You know, to make sure everything goes smoothly for me." She practically purred the last word. I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Chloe, don't be an idiot. They're trying to protect themselves. Did you even read what you're signing?" She let out a mock gasp. "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you're the family lawyer now. Don't worry, big brother. I trust them way more than I trust you. And honestly, it's kind of funny how pressed you are about this. Are you scared I'm going to end up with your share?" I didn't respond. I simply hung up. I had no time to her nonsense. My hand was shaking with anger. I was done trying to save someone who refused to see the truth. Chloe could enjoy her moment of superiority. She'd figure it out when it was too late. I decided to confront them alone. This wasn't something I could let slide. If they thought they could twist everything in their favor and take my money under the guise of helping Chloe, they were sorely mistaken. When I showed up at their house, Melissa opened the door with that fake, sugary smile she always used when trying to deflect, as if she and my dad had done nothing. "Ethan, what a surprise," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." I didn't waste any time. "We need to talk about the will and this ridiculous lawsuit." Her smile faltered, but she managed to maintain her usual tone of condescension. "Oh, Ethan, you're making this into such a big deal. We're doing what's best for the family. For Chloe. You should be supporting us in this, not fighting us." Dad came in from the kitchen, already defensive. His face was red, and he slammed his coffee mug down on the counter. "Melissa is right. This is about making sure Chloe has what she needs to get back on her feet. You're being selfish." I scoffed. "Don't insult my intelligence. This isn't about Chloe. It's about you two trying to get your hands on my share of the inheritance. You've already drained her funds, and now you want to keep the gravy train rolling. Let's not pretend this is about helping anyone but yourselves. Especially you, Melissa. You're the one who's making the fuzz." Melissa's expression turned icy. "How dare you accuse us of that?" she hissed. "We're trying to protect this family. Chloe needs support, and we're doing what's necessary to make that happen. You should be ashamed of yourself for thinking otherwise. I said, you mean using her money and mine to bail yourselves out of debt? That's not support, that's theft. And now you're coming after my inheritance to cover for your mistakes. The forfeiture clause in Grandpa's will is clear. If you keep pushing this lawsuit, you'll lose everything. Dad pointed a finger at me, his hand trembling with anger. You don't know what you're talking about. Chloe's been through a lot, and we're doing what we can to help her. If you weren't so greedy, you'd see that. Greedy? I laughed bitterly. You're the ones who've been dipping into money that doesn't belong to you. You're not doing this for Chloe. You're doing it for yourselves. And if you think I'm just going to roll over and let you take my share, you're dead wrong. The room fell into a heavy silence. Melissa's expressions cannot be explained, and Dad looked ready to explode, but I didn't care. I turned and walked out, leaving them to stew in their lies and manipulations. They'd made their choices, brought out the lawsuit thing, and now they'd have to deal with it. I was done playing their game. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to make sure they lost everything. After that, their desperation drove them to push forward with the lawsuit, escalating the battle to levels I hadn't thought possible. They dragged me into endless depositions, forcing me to relive every detail of Grandpa's final months, their financial manipulations, and the countless arguments that had torn our family apart. It was emotionally draining, a constant barrage of accusations and twisted narratives designed to make me look like the villain. Every court appearance felt like stepping into a war zone. My parents' lawyer, a slick, condescending type, relished painting me as the ungrateful, conniving grandson who had somehow coerced Grandpa into writing them out of the will. They claimed Grandpa hadn't been of sound mind, that I'd manipulated him into adding the forfeiture clause, and that the entire estate plan was a ploy to exclude them unfairly. But I wasn't alone in this fight. Aunt Julia, true to her word, stood firmly by my side. She became my fiercest ally, attending every hearing, every deposition, and providing testimony that cut through their lies like a scalpel. She spoke with unwavering conviction about Grandpa's clear intentions, his sharp mind right up until the end, and his disdain for anyone who tried to manipulate or take advantage of the family legacy. He was a man of principles, she told the court during her testimony, and he was very clear about what he wanted. Ethan didn't influence him. He respected Ethan because Ethan had earned it. This lawsuit is a disgrace to his memory. Her words carried weight, but the case dragged on for months. My parents clung to their delusions, throwing every baseless argument they could muster at the court, hoping something would stick. Depositions turned into cross-examinations that felt more like interrogations, as their lawyer tried to pick apart my character and motives. It was exhausting, but I refused to back down. The turning point came when the financial records were submitted as evidence. The documents laid bare the truth, the debts, the misuse of Chloe's inheritance, and their blatant attempts to rewrite history for their own benefit. It was damning, and no amount of spin could undo the damage. The final day in court was surreal. The judge reviewed everything, the will, the testimonies, the financial records, and delivered a ruling that felt like a breath of fresh air. The will is clear, and the evidence supports its validity, the judge said firmly. The claims of undue influence are unfounded, and the forfeiture clause is enforceable. The plaintiff's share of the inheritance is forfeited as stipulated. Just like that, it was over. My parents lost everything, every last penny they'd been banking on. Their faces in that moment were a mix of shock, rage, and disbelief. The victory was bittersweet. I hadn't wanted things to escalate to this point, but there was no other way to protect Grandpa's legacy, or myself. They'd forced my hand, and while I felt a sense of justice, it was hard to ignore the scars the battle had left behind. The battle was over, but the healing would take time. Melissa and Dad's wrath didn't dissipate after the loss. They spread their bitterness far and wide, slandering me to anyone who would listen and trying to spin the narrative in their favor. Okay, perfectum. Every phone call with extended relatives was now a battleground for their narrative. You've destroyed this family, Dad growled during one particularly hostile call. Your greed has cost us everything. I shot back incredulous. You're the ones who gambled everything trying to take what wasn't yours. This is on you. It was exhausting. Chloe wasn't breaking free from our parents' influence. She'd already chosen her side, aligning herself with their manipulations during the lawsuit. Even when the judge handed down the ruling that stripped our parents of their inheritance, she still clung to the narrative that they were victims of my greed. For months after the court case, she distanced herself from me, her conversations with me terse and pointed, accusing me of fracturing the family. But as time passed, cracks began to form in her loyalty. Our parents, now spiraling financially, started pressing her harder for money. It didn't take long for Chloe to realize that their promises to support her were just smoke and mirrors. They weren't trying to help her. They were using her. Not everyone in the family was so understanding. Uncle Peter, ever the self-appointed defender of family loyalty, made it his mission to remind me of my supposed betrayal at every opportunity. At one family barbecue, he cornered me with his coffee in hand. "Ethan, you really should try to fix things with your parents. They're struggling because of you, you know?" I sighed, already tired of the conversation. "They're struggling because they've spent years mismanaging money and manipulating people. That's not on me." He wagged a finger at me, his face flushed. "It doesn't matter. You're their son. It's your responsibility to step up." I didn't bother hiding my frustration. "Respectfully, Uncle Peter, if you think they deserve so much help, why don't you step up? Or is it easier to lecture me than to actually do something?" I think I became bold after everything I've been to. His face turned an impressive shade of red, and he stomped off, muttering under his breath. It wasn't much, but it felt good to finally stand my ground. Despite the lingering tension with some family members, I started to see the benefits of standing firm. My inheritance allowed me to pay off my student loans, which had been a huge weight on my shoulders. I invested in a small business I dreamed of starting, a financial consulting firm aimed at helping young professionals navigate their finances. It felt like I was finally taking control of my life in a way that went beyond just money. My parents, meanwhile, were spiraling. Without their inheritance or our financial support, their situation grew more precarious. They sold their house and moved into a smaller rental property, which they could barely afford. Instead of taking responsibility for their choices, they kept blaming me for everything. "They're telling everyone you abandoned them," my aunt said one day, scrolling through texts from a distant cousin. "It's like they're trying to rewrite history." "Let them," I said. "The people who matter know the truth." Still, the scars remained. The betrayal cut deep, and rebuilding my sense of self-worth was a slow process. But every step I took toward independence, financially, emotionally, and mentally, was a step away from their control. I didn't just inherit money from Grandpa. I inherited his strength, his values, and his unwavering belief in fairness. And that, more than anything, was worth fighting for.